So today we're going to talk about Hobbes and Locke and how their philosophies affected the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. So let's go ahead and label our paragraphs. So you have paragraph number 1, paragraph number 2, paragraph number 3, 4, and 5. So now we're going to read each paragraph and then we're going to go back and mark it up and make some points in the margins. So people in the 17th century were concerned with order and power, and these concerns were clear in the political thought at the time. William Blackstone was a judge and a professor of law in the 18th century. He wrote a famous book called Commentaries of the Laws of England to argue his beliefs. He argued that making English common law, its legal tradition and principles, important again, was the best way to achieve political stability. Two English political thinkers in the 17th century proved their own response to the English revolutions of the 17th century. They were Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. So let's go ahead and get one highlighter, and we're going to highlight the first sentence so it stands out because people in the 17th century were concerned with order and power, and people were trying to figure out how to go against and rebel against the church. So the second thing we're going to highlight in the paragraph is at the bottom it says responses to the English revolutions of the 17th century. With another highlighter, we're going to go ahead and highlight Thomas Hobbes and John Locke because those are the two main people that we're going to talk about within this passage. So you can keep your orange highlighter, and now let's go ahead and read paragraph 2 about Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes was worried by the revolutionary upheavals in England. He wrote a work on political thought called Leviathan, which was published in 1651. Hobbes wrote the book to try to deal with the problems of disorder. Hobbes argued that before society was organized, humans were not guided by reason and moral ideals, and their life was a difficult struggle to survive. Then people made a social contract and agreed to form a state. They did this to stop themselves from destroying one another. People agreed to accept government by an absolute ruler. This ruler had unlimited power because the ruler's task was to suppress rebellion. Hobbes felt that an absolute ruler was needed to preserve order in society. Hobbes called the state the Great Leviathan, to which people owe their peace and safety. So let's go ahead and highlight the work that Thomas Hobbes did, which is called Leviathan. And we are going to highlight what Leviathan pretty much says. So in the next sentence, it says Hobbes wrote the book to try to deal with the problem of disorder and argue that before society was organized, people were not guided by reason and moral ideals, and their life was difficult to struggle. So he also came up with the social contract, which will be on your SOLs, but the social contract did not stop from destroying people and one another. People agreed to accept government by an absolute ruler, which you know from your vocabulary, which means this ruler had unlimited power because the ruler's task was to suppress rebellion. So let's go ahead and highlight that. And then Hobbes felt an absolute ruler was needed to preserve order in society. So, with a pen or pencil in the margins to the left, you're going to write Hobbes wrote Leviathan, and Hobbes' government is an absolute ruler. Also, at the top where there's space, you can go ahead and write Hobbes equals the English Civil War, and you can write Locke equals Glorious Revolution. So let's move on to John Locke, which is paragraph 3. So John Locke viewed political power quite differently from Hobbes. Locke publishes 2 treatises of government in 1690. In this work, Locke argued against the absolute or total rule of one person. In contrast to Hobbes, Locke believed that before society was organized, humans did not live in a state of war. Instead, they lived in a state of equality and freedom. Locke believed that all the humans had certain natural rights, or rights with which they were born. This included rights to life, liberty, and property. So let's go ahead and highlight Locke's work, which is the 2 treatises of government, and that he argued against the absolute and total ruler of one person. And let's go ahead and highlight the natural rights, which were life, liberty, and property, which, hint, hint, Locke influenced Thomas Jefferson, yet Thomas Jefferson wrote Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. So in the margin, go ahead and write Locke in 2 treatises of government. And let's go ahead and write Locke, government, life, liberty, and property as the characteristics. So let's go ahead and read the 4th paragraph. So like Hobbes, Locke believed that the same problems did exist when humans lived in the state of nature. People found it difficult to protect their natural rights, and so they agreed to establish a government. The government ensured the protection of these rights and punished those who violated these rights. The role of the government was to protect the rights of the people, and in return, the people would act reasonably toward the government. It was possible, however, for a government to break its contract with the people and the right to remove or change the government because it had been betrayed their trust. If the people chose to remove the government, then they could form a new one. So this paragraph talks about the social contract. And this is what both Hobbes and Locke believed in. So in the 5th paragraph says, to Locke, people meant the aristocracy that owned land. He was not an advocate of democracy. His ideas gained a great deal of importance in the 18th century. Locke's ideas were used to support demand for a constitutional government, the rule and the protection of the rights. Locke's ideas can be found in both the American Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. So Locke's form of government is constitutional and clearly stated that he has influenced the American Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution.